Hashtag the Council witnessed humanity's true face, and the facade crumbled. Hashtag Story Part 1. The Great Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian floor, its crystalline dome reaching toward the stars like a prayer frozen in time. Ambassador Elena Vesquez walked across that vast expanse, her simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate biomechanical suits and energy-wreathed forms of the other species' representatives. Her footsteps echoed in the sacred silence, each one marking humanity's final approach to judgment. Around her, the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations watched with a mixture of curiosity, disdain, and barely concealed amusement. The Kethmori delegation, their translucent crystalline bodies shimmering with internal light, whispered among themselves in harmonic frequencies that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The massive Vorthak representatives, each one standing 3 meters tall with their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's soft illumination, clicked their mandibles in what Elena had learned to recognize as their equivalent of laughter. But it was the Zephyrians who commanded the most attention. As the eldest species in the galaxy, having achieved spaceflight when most worlds were still cooling from their formation, they held the position of honor at the center of the Council's crescent formation. Their leader, High Arbiter Salandris, was an ancient being whose consciousness had been transferred between multiple bodies over the millennia. His current form was humanoid but stretched and ethereal, as if someone had taken a person and made them from moonlight and memory. Elena reached the center of the chamber and stopped at the designated position. A perfect circle of darker obsidian marked the spot where she was to stand, and, as her feet touched its edge, the chamber's acoustics shifted. Every word she spoke from this point would be amplified and translated simultaneously into the 47 languages of the Council's member species. High Arbiter Salandris rose from his throne-like seat, his form seeming to float rather than walk as he approached the edge of his platform. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of eons, each word carefully chosen and delivered with the precision of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "We gather today to address a matter of unprecedented urgency," Salandris began, his words rippling through the chamber's translation matrix. "The species known as humanity has submitted a petition for membership in our council. This petition has been under review for 1 standard solar cycle, during which time we have observed their civilization, studied their history, and evaluated their potential contribution to our collective advancement." Elena kept her expression neutral, though her heart pounded against her ribs like a caged bird. Everything humanity had worked toward for the past century led to this moment. First contact with the Kethmori in 2387 had changed everything. Humanity had gone from a single-world species struggling with climate change and resource depletion to a member of a vast galactic community almost overnight. But membership in the Council itself was different. It meant access to technologies that could solve every problem humanity faced, from aging to energy production to interstellar travel. More than that, it meant survival. The galaxy was not a peaceful place, despite the Council's best efforts. There were species out there that viewed younger civilizations as either resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. Council membership offered protection under the collective defense agreements that had kept the galaxy relatively stable for thousands of years. However, Salandris continued, and Elena felt her stomach drop, "Our investigation has revealed disturbing patterns in human behavior. Patterns that call into question whether humanity possesses the wisdom and restraint necessary for Council membership." A holographic display materialized in the air above the chamber's center, visible to all the assembled delegates. Images began to cascade across its surface, and Elena recognized them with growing dread. Battle scenes from human history flashed by, ancient warriors clashing with bronze swords, medieval knights charging across blood-soaked fields, soldiers crawling through trenches in the First World War, mushroom clouds rising over Japanese cities, modern conflicts in far-off places whose names had become synonymous with suffering. Throughout their recorded history, Salandris continued, humans have demonstrated an alarming propensity for violence. They have waged war constantly, developed increasingly devastating weapons, and shown little regard for the preservation of life when their interests are threatened. Even now, as they petition for our acceptance, conflicts rage across their homeworld. The Vorthak representative, General Klexnoth, clicked his mandibles approvingly. "The data is clear," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. In their brief 3,000-year recorded history, humans have been at peace for less than 8% of that time. They are a warrior species, driven by aggression and territorial expansion. Such beings have no place among civilized species. Elena felt the weight of the chamber's attention pressing down on her like a physical force. She had known this moment would come. The Council's investigation had been thorough, and there was no hiding humanity's bloody past. But she had also known that this was her one chance to show them what they were missing, to reveal the truth behind the statistics and historical records. She cleared her throat, and the chamber's acoustics carried the sound to every corner of the vast space. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, though inside she felt like she was standing at the edge of an abyss. "Honored representatives," she began, "I do not dispute the facts you have presented. Humanity's history is indeed marked by conflict, by violence, by decisions that we ourselves look back upon with regret and shame. We have made mistakes, some of them terrible ones, and we continue to struggle with the legacy of our past." She paused, letting her words settle in the chamber's silence. "But I would ask you to consider this: every species in this chamber has a history. Every civilization that has achieved spaceflight has faced moments of crisis, times when they could have chosen destruction over growth, isolation over cooperation. The question is not whether we have made mistakes, but whether we have learned from them." The Kethmori representative, a being whose name was a crystalline chime that Elena's throat could not reproduce, pulsed with a soft blue light that their translation systems interpreted as skeptical amusement. "Learning from mistakes requires wisdom, young human. Your species shows little evidence of possessing such wisdom. Even as we speak, your people fight over resources, territories, ideological differences. Where is this learning you speak of?" Elena had anticipated this challenge. She gestured to her aide, Dr. James Chen, who activated a portable holographic projector. New images began to appear in the air, replacing the scenes of warfare that had dominated the display. "You speak of our conflicts," Elena said, "but you ignore our responses to them. Yes, we have wars, but after each one, we have built institutions designed to prevent the next. After our first global war, we created international organizations. After our second, we established the United Nations, imperfect though it may be. After we nearly destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons, we created treaties and safeguards." The images showed humanity's efforts at peacekeeping, at cooperation, at building bridges across the divisions that had once seemed insurmountable. Schools and hospitals rising from the rubble of war zones. Enemies becoming allies. Former battlefields transformed into memorials dedicated to peace. "But, more than that," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger, "you see our capacity for violence and assume it defines us. I would argue that it is precisely because we know the cost of conflict that we value peace so deeply. A species that has never faced the choice between war and peace cannot truly appreciate what peace means." High Arbiter Silandris raised one elongated hand, and Elena fell silent. The ancient being's eyes, which seemed to contain distant stars, studied her with an intensity that made her feel as though he were looking directly into her soul. "Your words are eloquent, Ambassador Vasquez," he said finally. "But words are easily spoken. The Council requires more than rhetoric to make such a momentous decision. We require proof that humanity has truly evolved beyond its violent origins." The chamber fell into absolute silence. Elena could feel the moment balancing on a knife's edge. This was it, the moment she had prepared for throughout her entire diplomatic career. Everything hinged on what happened next. "Then, give us the chance to prove it," she said simply. "Put us to the test. Give us a challenge, a situation where our old instincts would lead us toward violence, and judge us by our response." A ripple of surprise ran through the assembled delegates. Several species began communicating in rapid bursts of their native languages, creating a symphony of clicks, chimes, and harmonic frequencies that the translation matrix struggled to process. General Klexnoth leaned forward on his platform, his massive form creating a shadow that seemed to reach toward Elena. "You would voluntarily submit to a trial? Knowing that failure means permanent exclusion from this council?" Elena nodded without hesitation. "I would. We would. Because we believe in what humanity can become, not just what we have been." Salandris exchanged glances with the other senior council members. The ethereal collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, flickered in patterns that Elena had learned indicated deep contemplation. The ancient observers, whose species had long ago transcended physical form and existed as patterns of thought within quantum fields, created subtle distortions in the air around their delegation as they communicated at speeds beyond biological comprehension. Finally, Salandris spoke again. "Very well. The Council will convene to discuss this proposal. If we decide to proceed with such a trial, it will be designed to test not just humanity's capacity for peace, but their wisdom, their judgment, and their ability to make difficult choices under pressure." He paused, and, when he continued, his voice carried a warning that seemed to echo from the deepest reaches of space. "But, understand this, Ambassador Vasquez. Such a trial will not be a simple test of military prowess or technological advancement. It will be designed to reveal the true nature of your species when all pretense is stripped away. Are you prepared for what that might reveal?" Elena met his ancient gaze without flinching. "We are," she said. "Because we believe that when all pretense is stripped away, what you'll find at humanity's core is not the monster you expect, but something that might surprise you." The High Arbiter nodded slowly. "Then, let us see if your faith in your species is justified. The Council will reconvene in 3 standard days with our decision." As the session ended and the delegates began to file out of the chamber, Elena remained standing in her circle of dark obsidian. Around her, the vast space gradually emptied, but she could feel the weight of expectations pressing down on her shoulders. In 3 days, humanity would learn its fate. And, somewhere in the depths of space, forces were already moving that would put her bold words to the ultimate test. What none of them knew, including Elena herself, was that the trial had already begun. At that very moment, a distress signal was racing across the galaxy from a distant star system, carrying news of a catastrophe that would force humanity to reveal its true face to the watching universe. The facade that had protected them for so long was about to crumble, and, when it did, everyone would see what lay beneath. The question was whether what they found would inspire fear or wonder. In 3 days, they would all have their answer. The Council witnessed humanity's true face, and the facade crumbled. ## Story Part 2. The distress signal reached the Council chambers 18 hours after Elena's challenge had been accepted. She was in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, reviewing her notes for the upcoming trial, when the emergency alerts began cascading across her personal communication array. The priority level was beyond anything she had seen before. This was a galaxy-wide emergency broadcast. Captain Sarah Rodriguez burst through Elena's door without the customary diplomatic protocol, her usually composed face flushed with urgency. "Ambassador, you need to see this. The entire council is being recalled for an emergency session. Something's happened in the Kepler 442 system." Elena's blood went cold. Kepler 442 was home to the Ilex, a peaceful agricultural species that had achieved council membership only 50 years earlier. Their world was one of the garden paradises of the galaxy, with floating cities that drifted above vast fields of bioluminescent crops. More importantly, it was also home to nearly 2 billion souls across multiple species, refugees from various conflicts, research scientists, and traders who had made the peaceful world their home. The emergency session convened within 2 hours, but this time the Great Assembly Chamber felt different. The usual formal protocols were abandoned as representatives materialized via quantum transmission from across the galaxy. The air itself seemed charged with tension as holographic displays filled the space above the chamber, showing real-time data feeds from the Kepler 442 system. High Arbiter Salandris appeared at the center of the assembly, his usually serene demeanor cracked with visible strain. "Representatives of the Council," he began, his voice cutting through the chaotic mixture of languages and frequencies, "we face a catastrophe unlike any we have encountered in living memory." The main display shifted to show Kepler 442b, but, instead of the serene blue-green world Elena remembered from the diplomatic archives, the planet's surface was obscured by massive storm systems. Electrical discharges the size of continents flickered across the atmosphere, and the sensor readings showed gravitational anomalies that made Elena's stomach lurch just looking at them. 12 hours ago, Salandris continued, the Kepler 442 system suffered a massive stellar flare event. The star, previously stable for over 4 billion years, ejected a coronal mass of unprecedented size and intensity. The electromagnetic pulse disabled all technological infrastructure on Kepler 442b, while the gravitational shockwave destabilized the planet's orbit. General Klexnatha's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the data. How long before orbital decay becomes critical? The response came from Dr. Vexhala, the Council's chief astrophysicist and a member of the ancient observer species. When she spoke, her words appeared as floating text since her people had no vocal cords, existing as pure consciousness within quantum fields. Current projections indicate total atmospheric loss will begin within 72 standard hours. Complete planetary destruction will follow within 100 hours. Elena felt the chamber's atmosphere shift as the full magnitude of the crisis became clear. 2 billion sentient beings were going to die, and they had less than 4 days to prevent it. What about evacuation? Asked the Kethmori representative, their crystalline form pulsing with urgent orange light. Surely the combined fleets of the Council can interrupted Admiral Thexcole of the Vanguard Fleet Command, a grizzled Zephyrian whose consciousness inhabited a battle-scarred cybernetic body. Even with every available vessel, we could evacuate perhaps 10 million beings before the atmospheric cascade begins. The logistics are simply impossible. The chamber erupted into chaos as 47 different species began proposing solutions simultaneously. The translation matrix struggled to keep up as representatives shouted, clicked, chimed, and harmonized their desperate suggestions. Some proposed using gravitational anchors to stabilize the planet's orbit. Others suggested massive shield generators to protect the atmosphere. A few of the more technologically advanced species even proposed attempting to artificially reignite the star's core to reverse the damage. But Elena was studying the data feeds with growing alarm, because she saw something that the others seemed to be missing. The stellar flare hadn't been natural. Hidden in the sensor readings, masked by the electromagnetic interference, were trace signatures that she recognized from humanity's own dark history. This wasn't an accident, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with startling clarity. The chamber fell silent as every representative turned toward her. Elena activated her portable holographic display and began highlighting the anomalous readings she had identified. Look at the flare's energy signature, she continued, her diplomatic training taking over despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. The isotopic ratios are all wrong. The electromagnetic frequency patterns don't match natural stellar phenomenon. Someone did this deliberately. Dr. Vexhala's consciousness focused on Elena's data, processing it at speeds that would have burned out a biological brain. After a moment that felt like eternity, her response appeared in the air above the chamber. Analysis confirms human assessment. This event was artificially induced. Weapon signature matches theoretical models for stellar manipulation technology. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Someone had weaponized a star and used it to commit genocide on a scale that defied comprehension. But, more than that, they had done it in a way that would have appeared natural if Elena hadn't recognized the subtle signs of artificial intervention. General Klexnatha's massive form seemed to shrink as the reality settled over him. Who? He whispered, though his voice still carried across the chamber like distant thunder. Who would do such a thing? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Elena's aide, Dr. Chen, had been monitoring communication intercepts from the Outer Rim territories. His face was pale as he transmitted his findings to the main display. 3 days ago, a group calling itself the Purification Coalition claimed responsibility for what they called cleansing actions against what they termed genetic pollution in the galaxy. The message was broadcast on encrypted channels used by extremist groups. Elena's heart sank as she read the intercepted transmission. The Purification Coalition was a loose alliance of supremacist groups from various species who believed that the galaxy had become too diverse, too accepting of what they saw as inferior life forms. The Illics, with their open society and willingness to accept refugees, had been a particular target of their hatred. But what made Elena's blood run cold was the final line of the intercepted message: "This is only the beginning. The weekend, the mongrel species must be eliminated. The galaxy must be purified, one star at a time." High Arbiter Silandris studied the data with an expression that seemed to age him centuries in moments. How many systems are vulnerable to this type of attack? Dr. Vexhala's analysis appeared instantly. Approximately 3,000 inhabited systems have stellar classifications that would allow for induced flare events. Population at risk, 400 billion souls. The number hung in the chamber's air like a death sentence. 400 billion lives threatened by fanatics with the technology to weaponize stars themselves. We need to evacuate Kepler 442b immediately, Elena said, her mind racing through possibilities. But, more than that, we need to find these extremists and stop them before they can strike again. With what? Admiral Fexcole demanded. We've already established that evacuation is impossible with current resources. And, as for finding the Purification Coalition, they could be operating from anywhere in the galaxy. We don't have the time or the resources to. We do, Elena interrupted, and the chamber fell silent again. Humanity does. She activated her emergency communication link to Earth, knowing that what she was about to propose would change everything. I'm calling for immediate implementation of the Lazarus Protocol. The alien representatives had no idea what she was talking about, but Elena's own aide went white with shock. Ambassador, Dr. Chen whispered urgently, the Lazarus Protocol is theoretical. It's never been tested on this scale, and the risks, I know the risks, Elena said firmly. Then, she turned to address the assembly. Honored representatives, humanity requests permission to attempt a rescue operation that will require us to reveal technologies we have kept hidden since our first contact with galactic civilization. The chamber erupted again, but, this time the chaos carried a different energy. Hope mixed with fear as species that had dismissed humanity as violent primitives suddenly realized they might have underestimated their newest petitioners. Silandris raised his hand for silence, his ancient eyes fixed on Elena with laser intensity. Explain. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either save 2 billion lives or condemn humanity to eternal exile. For the past century, since we first learned we weren't alone in the galaxy, humanity has been preparing for the possibility that we might face a threat beyond our ability to handle through conventional diplomacy or military action. The Lazarus Protocol is our contingency plan for planetary-scale evacuation. She paused, then continued with words that would echo through galactic history. We can save them. All of them. Every single soul on that planet. But, it will require us to reveal capabilities that we hoped we would never need to use. Technologies that some of you might find disturbing. General Klexnoth leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. What kind of technologies? Elena met his gaze without flinching. The kind that a species develops when it has spent its entire history learning to survive against impossible odds. The kind that emerge when you realize that sometimes the only way to save lives is to be willing to do things that others won't. She activated her communication link again, and her voice carried across space to the command centers of every human military installation in the galaxy. This is Ambassador Vasquez, authorization code Phoenix 77 Alpha. I am implementing the Lazarus Protocol effective immediately. All stealth fleets are to decloak and proceed to the Kepler 442 system at maximum speed. Initiate Operation Guardian Angel. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the galaxy, space itself seemed to shimmer as nearly 300 human vessels suddenly became visible. They had been there all along, hidden by stealth technologies that made them undetectable to Council sensors, watching and waiting in the shadows. The assembled representatives stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. The human fleet that materialized was unlike anything in the galactic archives. These weren't the simple exploration vessels and merchant ships that humanity had been permitted to operate. These were warships, but designed in ways that defied conventional understanding of military spacecraft. Each vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of standard Council cruisers, but their designs were organic, flowing, almost alive-looking. More disturbing were the energy signatures. These ships were powered by technologies that the Council's sensors couldn't identify, running on principles that seemed to violate known physics. Impossible, whispered Dr. Vexhala, her consciousness struggling to process what she was seeing. These vessels, their quantum signatures suggest they exist partially outside normal spacetime. How is this possible? Elena's expression was grim as she watched her species' greatest secret revealed to the galaxy. Because when you're the newest species in a galaxy full of ancient civilizations, some of whom might not have your best interests at heart, you learn to prepare for the worst. And, sometimes, preparing for the worst means developing capabilities that others find uncomfortable. Admiral Thexcol was studying the fleet compositions with growing unease. These aren't just warships. These are planet killers. Some of these vessels show energy outputs that could sterilize entire worlds. Yes, Elena said simply. They are. Because we learned long ago that sometimes the only way to protect innocent lives is to be capable of terrible things. The question is what you do with that capability. She turned to address the full assembly, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's hidden history. For 100 years, we have maintained this fleet in secret. We have had the power to conquer, to destroy, to impose our will on the galaxy by force. And, in all that time, we have never used it for anything but protection and preparation. The chamber was absolutely silent now, every representative struggling to process the revelation that the species they had dismissed as violent primitives had actually been the most dangerous military force in the galaxy all along. But, today, Elena continued, we're going to use everything we've built, everything we've prepared for, not to conquer or destroy, but to save every single life on that dying world. Because that's who we really are when you strip away all the pretense and fear. That's what lies at humanity's true core. High Arbiter Silandris studied the fleet displays for a long moment before speaking. And, if we refuse to allow this intervention? If we decide that your deception disqualifies humanity from council consideration? Elena's smile was sad but determined. Then, we'll save them anyway. Because that's also who we are. As the human fleet began its journey toward Kepler 442, racing against time to save 2 billion souls, the council representatives realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. The question now was whether what they discovered would terrify them or inspire them. The facade was finally crumbling, and what lay beneath would change the galaxy forever. The council witnessed humanity's true face, and the facade crumbled. ## Story Part 3. The human fleet reached Kepler 442 in 18 hours, a journey that should have taken 3 days even with the most advanced council propulsion systems. As the massive vessels dropped out of what the humans called fold space, the council observation team watched in stunned silence as technologies beyond their understanding began to deploy. Ambassador Elena stood in the command center of the flagship Indomitable Will, surrounded by holographic displays that showed real-time data from every ship in the fleet. The vessel itself defied conventional understanding, its corridors seemed to bend space around them, allowing the ship to be somehow larger inside than outside. The command crew moved with military precision, but their equipment was unlike anything the council had ever encountered. Captain Marcus Webb, the fleet commander, was a grizzled veteran whose scarred hands danced across control interfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. Ambassador, he said, his voice carrying the weight of impossible responsibility, we've got full tactical assessment of the situation. It's worse than the preliminary reports suggested. Elena studied the data feeds with growing dread. The planet's atmospheric storms had intensified, and the gravitational anomalies were causing tectonic instability across all major continents. Massive earthquakes were tearing apart the floating cities, while the electromagnetic interference made communication with the surface nearly impossible. How much time do we have? She asked. 47 hours before atmospheric cascade becomes irreversible, Webb replied. Maybe less if the tectonic activity triggers the volcanic superchambers on the northern continent. Elena closed her eyes briefly, running calculations in her head. 2 billion souls. 47 hours. It was mathematically impossible with conventional evacuation methods, even using every ship in the human fleet. But the Lazarus Protocol wasn't conventional. Begin Phase 1 deployment, she ordered. What happened next would be debated by xenobiologists and philosophers for centuries to come. The human ships began to transform. What had appeared to be solid hulls opened like blooming flowers, revealing internal structures that seemed to unfold into dimensions that shouldn't exist. From each vessel, thousands of smaller craft emerged, not launched, but literally birthed from the parent ships like living organisms reproducing. These smaller vessels were unlike anything in galactic records. They moved with organic fluidity, their hulls seeming to flow rather than fly. More disturbing to the watching council observers, the craft appeared to be thinking entities in their own right, making split-second navigation decisions through the chaotic atmospheric conditions of the dying planet without any apparent communication from their parent ships. General Klexnoth, observing from the council monitoring station, clicked his mandibles in what his species recognized as profound unease. "What are those things? They move like they're alive." Dr. Vexhala's analysis appeared in glowing text above the observation deck. Energy signatures suggest a form of biological-technological hybrid. The craft appear to possess nervous systems analogous to biological entities, but their construction materials are clearly artificial. Impossible by known scientific principles. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the rescue operation began in earnest. The organic ships descended through the screaming atmosphere like living comets, their hulls adapting in real time to the changing conditions. They moved through electrical storms that would have fried conventional electronics, their biotechnological systems actually growing stronger from the ambient energy. Elena watched the rescue feeds with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Each of the bioships could carry nearly 10,000 evacuees in conditions that should have been lethal overcrowding. But, through technologies that humanity had developed in desperate secrecy, the internal spaces of each craft expanded to accommodate their passengers, creating pocket dimensions where time moved differently and resources could be recycled at the quantum level. But it was what happened at the pickup sites that truly revealed the nature of humanity's preparation. The bioships didn't just land and load passengers. They interfaced directly with the Ilex population centers, their hulls opening to reveal medical facilities that made council hospitals look primitive. Injured evacuees were healed in minutes by nanomedical systems that worked at the cellular level. The elderly and infirm were placed in biostasis fields that would preserve them indefinitely. Most remarkably, the ships seemed to understand the psychological needs of their passengers. For species that required specific atmospheric compositions, the internal environments automatically adjusted. For beings who suffered claustrophobia, the pocket dimensions created the illusion of vast open spaces. Children were comforted by holographic companions that appeared to be their favorite mythological creatures. Captain Webb pulled up the evacuation statistics, his expression grim despite the miraculous progress. "We're moving faster than projected, but it's still not enough. Even with our full capabilities, we can only evacuate maybe half the population before atmospheric collapse." Elena nodded, having expected this moment. "Then, we moved to Phase 2. Webb's scarred face went pale. "Ambassador, Phase 2 is theoretical. We've never tested it on anything larger than an asteroid." "Then, we'd better hope our theories are correct," Elena replied. She opened a communication channel to every human ship in the fleet. "All vessels, this is Vasquez. Initiate planetary stabilization protocol. We're going to buy ourselves some time." What happened next would be remembered as the moment humanity revealed its true nature to the galaxy. The massive human ships repositioned themselves around the dying planet in a complex three-dimensional formation. As they took their positions, each vessel began to emit energy fields that intersected and reinforced each other in patterns that seemed to follow mathematical principles beyond current galactic understanding. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The gravitational anomalies that were tearing the planet apart began to stabilize as the human ships created artificial gravity wells that counteracted the stellar damage. The atmospheric storms, fed by the planet's orbital decay, started to calm as the ship's energy fields created pockets of stability in the upper atmosphere. But the most remarkable change was to the planet's orbit itself. Slowly, inexorably, Kepler 442b began to move back toward a stable trajectory around its damaged star. The human fleet was literally moving a planet. Dr. Vexhala's consciousness nearly overloaded as she tried to process what she was witnessing. Her analysis appeared in increasingly frantic bursts of text. Impossible. Energy requirements would exceed total power output of most stellar systems. No known technology can manipulate gravitational fields on this scale.
Yet sensors confirm planetary orbit is stabilizing.
High Arbiter Salandris, monitoring from the council chambers, felt something he had not experienced in millennia, genuine awe mixed with profound fear.
How, he whispered to the empty air around him. How are they doing this? The answer came from an unexpected source.
One of the human bioships, damaged by atmospheric debris, had been forced to make an emergency landing near the Council's emergency monitoring station on Kepler 442b. As Council technicians approached the vessel to offer assistance, they discovered something that would change their understanding of humanity forever.
The ship was alive.
Not metaphorically, not in the sense of artificial intelligence, but, genuinely, biologically alive. Its hull was made of engineered organisms that could survive in the vacuum of space, think at quantum speeds, and manipulate matter at the molecular level. The ship's consciousness, vast and alien yet somehow familiar, communicated directly with their minds. "We are grown, not built," the ship entity explained in thoughts that bypassed language entirely.
"We are partners, not tools.
We choose to serve because we understand the value of life, all life, in ways that mechanical minds cannot." As the Council observers reeled from this revelation, more secrets emerged. The humans weren't just using advanced technology to save the planet, they were collaborating with an entirely new form of life that they had somehow created or evolved. The bioships were thinking, feeling entities who had chosen to dedicate their existence to preserving other forms of life. But, perhaps most disturbing of all was what the bioship revealed about humanity's true history.
The organic vessels hadn't been developed as weapons or tools of conquest.
They had been created as an ARC project, a failsafe against the possibility that humanity might one day face extinction. Every bioship contained genetic samples and cultural records from thousands of Earth species, including humanity itself. They were living libraries, preserving the essence of life against an uncertain future. "Your people fear us," the bioship observed to the Council technicians.
"They see our capabilities and assume we will use them as they would. But they do not understand what drives us.
We have looked into the darkness between stars and seen what happens to civilizations that forget the value of even a single life. We choose a different path." As the evacuation continued and the planet slowly stabilized, Elena received a priority communication from Earth. The voice belonged to Director Sarah Kim, head of the Lazarus Project and one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets.
"Ambassador," Kim said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion, "we've decoded additional transmissions from the Purification Coalition. They're planning to target the Council homeworlds next. They know about our intervention here, and they're accelerating their timeline."
Elena felt her heart skip a beat. The Council homeworlds housed nearly 1 trillion beings across multiple systems. If the extremists could weaponize those stars.
"How long?" she asked. 72 hours to their next attack. Maybe less." Elena closed her eyes, knowing that what she was about to do would irrevocably change humanity's relationship with the galaxy. "Director Kim, I'm authorizing full disclosure to the Council. Everything. The bioship program, the quantum fold technology, our surveillance networks, our defensive capabilities. All of it."
The silence on the other end of the communication stretched for several heartbeats. "Elena," Kim said finally, using her first name for the first time in their professional relationship, "you're talking about revealing technologies that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Or destroy it, if they fall into the wrong hands."
"I know," Elena replied.
"But, if we don't stop the Purification Coalition, there won't be a galactic civilization left to protect." She opened a direct channel to High Arbiter Salandris, knowing that her next words would echo through history. "Honored Arbiter, I request an immediate emergency session of the full Council. Humanity has information critical to the survival of every species in the galaxy, and we're prepared to share everything."
Salandris' response came after a moment that felt like eternity. "Everything, Ambassador Vasquez?"
"Everything," she confirmed. "Our technologies, our capabilities, our knowledge.
In exchange for one thing." "Name it."
Elena looked out at the rescued millions filling the bioships, at the planet slowly healing beneath the ministrations of humanity's hidden fleet, at the impossible sight of her species using their greatest weapons not to conquer but to save. Trust, she said simply. Trust us to use our capabilities not as conquerors but as guardians. Trust us to be what we've always claimed to be, a species that has learned to turn its capacity for violence into a capacity for protection. As the last evacuees lifted off from Kepler 442b and the planet settled into its new stable orbit, the Council prepared to witness the complete revelation of humanity's true nature. The facade hadn't just crumbled, it had been deliberately demolished by a species brave enough to show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of when the stakes demanded everything. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for the truth about humanity, and whether humanity was ready for what would come after the truth was revealed. In less than 3 days, they would all find out together as they faced a threat that would require not just human technology, but human spirit, to overcome. The time for pretense was over. Now came the real test of what humanity could become when they stopped hiding who they truly were.